This is John Howell Essential Cuts, your daily rundown of the best from today's show on 890 WLS.
Reading from Bob Hergus' column, which he wrote with Tim Novak, his partner at the Chicago Sun-Times. Illinois' gaming board say they were unaware of key information when the agency approved a state license back in 2019 for Jeffrey Bertucci's Steak and Egg or Diner, great name, in Cicero to offer video gaming there. Now they plan to revoke the license. They say they did not realize when they approved the gaming license that Mr. Bertucci had in fact testified back in 2010 in a mob gambling case. I think he received immunity for that. That he had paid winnings from illegal video gaming machines back in the day that were installed in his diner. And he then split his take with the Chicago outfit, the so-called Video Poker King. So that's the backstory. So let's welcome Bob Hergus back to the Big 89. Bob, as far as the Gaming Commission not realizing what was going on, that this guy had given testimony in a trial about illegal gaming years before, what's their excuse for missing this?
By the way, thanks for having me. Yeah, this seems to be a recurring thing that we've been writing about over the past 6 months, year or so, about questions as to why the Illinois Gaming Board has allowed certain people to be licensed to allow legal video gaming when they have things in their background that would seem to preclude that. And this is just the latest case. There's a little restaurant, a little 24-hour diner called Steak and Egger in Cicero. And this guy has owned it for a long time as part of a franchise deal with the Carr family that owns the chain, who are politically connected and elected officials in various places. And so they, before video gaming was legal, he had machines in there in tandem with some reputed mob figures, and then was paying out illegal winnings. And he testified under a grant of immunity at a mob trial, 2010, right around the time that this was actually legalized, video gaming was. And then moving forward, he applies in 2018 or so for a license to now legally offer gaming in his diner. It's approved by the Gaming Board in 2019, and we write about it in May. And the Gaming Board acknowledged or said just recently they did not know about the testimony and acknowledgement of illegal activity by this guy when he testified at the mob trial. So it's very strange.
But giving Bertucci the benefit of the doubt, was it Bertucci's obligation to disclose that years before he had given testimony?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is not all in the Gaming Board's lap, right? I mean, we have some personal responsibility in this world, and Bertucci was obligated to acknowledge to them if he wanted to be licensed as he was being vetted. He had the opportunity and the obligation to come clean about anything he had done in this sphere that was illegal. And what he did do was he acknowledged that he'd been arrested once before for keeping a house of gaming illegally back in 2000. So when he was being vetted in 2018 for the license, he acknowledges this sort of lesser crime, but leaves out, apparently, according to the Gaming Board, this testimony under grant of immunity in federal court for these reputed mob figures. And so now we inquire about it. Gaming Board says they learned about it from us, and now they're going to move to yank his license.
The Gaming Board obviously not integrated with all the other agencies of government, kind of the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing sort of thing?
Well, I mean, sort of. I mean, they are the state's gambling regulators. They are under the auspices of Governor Pritzker or any governor. And, I kind of have the long view on this a little bit. I mean, I was covering the Gaming Board when the Rosemont Casino was being proposed. And back then, a whiff or hint of mob connection to mafia, organized crime, et cetera, was disqualifying. And now there have been a series of very, subject of our stories, questions about why so-and-so is being licensed, given their admitted connections and obvious connections. So this is just the latest part of that.
You referenced that Rosemont Casino effort years ago. I knew a man who was an initial investor in that, and it just didn't move, and he pulled his money out before the whole thing collapsed, and he considers that to be one of the best deals of his life, to get his money out before it collapsed.
Yeah.
So Mr. Bertucci now will have his gaming license revoked for his place in Cicero. What about his place in Stickney?
Well, I'm not sure that he still owns that. The Stickney place was where, according to the gaming board, he owned a restaurant where the illegal gambling took place in 2000-ish when he was arrested. So I don't know anything about that beyond what's in the records. What he owns now is in Cicero, and he does have video gaming in there legally. He's been licensed since 2019. He's been pulling in, there's been millions of dollars of bets since that. So even though it's a little bitty spot, these places can be potentially very lucrative. To be fair to him, we did reach out to him, have not heard back. We reached out to him the first story, could not get him. We even showed up there looking for him at his restaurant, could not find him. So, we never did speak to him. So I do not know what his plans are. This is not like a done deal. The gaming board is planning and moving ahead with revoking, but there is a process that needs to go through, and he does have rights in terms of, presenting, mitigating circumstances or evidence or appealing this or whatever. So there is a process. That's
what I was going to ask you. He can appeal this gaming board's decision, right?
Yeah, I don't know if appeal is the right word, but there is a lengthy process that he can engage in if you'd like to push back and try to counter this.
I wonder if his defense will be, look, I was just a little ahead of the curve because I knew everything was going to be legalized anyway.
And really, when he testified, it literally was being legalized right then. But just prior to that, it was definitely illegal, and so he was doing two things, right? He was paying out illegally winnings in these machines, and he was also playing footsie with the mob.
Well, I guess it keeps you and your partner Tim Novak in business over there at the Sun-Times, doesn't it, Bob?
Yeah, sure does.
Bob Herga, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Much appreciated. I'll read your next installment in the Sun-Times.
You're listening to John Howell, Essential Cuts on 890 WLS.
Well, the deadline for the Major League Baseball trade, the deadline was 5 o'clock, so that was some 40 minutes ago. I thought we'd check in with Bret Gogoel. Austin Gogoel, Bret Gogoel, Bret Austin, whatever. Any combination works for me. Our de facto sports director here at the Big 89. Let's start on the north side. The Cubs, a little bit hotter than the White Sox, so any moves by the Cubs stay, and overall, what do you think?
First off, I'll take any combination of those names. I know what you mean deep down, but as for the Cubs, we kind of talked about it last week, is that they ended up kind of putting themselves in a tough position. Heading into yesterday, they made the big trade for third baseman Jeimer Candelario from the Washington Nationals. Fits a really big need. They needed somebody to plug in at the corner, but that was because they went from being 8 games down to rattling off 8 wins in a row, and before losing last night to the Reds, they were only 4 games back. So now, as they continue this series with the Reds, it's really going to determine whether or not that was the main trade that they made. They stood relatively pat today. They made a trade for a reliever from Kansas City. They traded a starting pitcher who really hadn't thrown for them much to the Tampa Bay Rays, but the big news is obviously that Cody Bellinger is staying put, and that Marcus Stroman is staying put. So those were 2 guys who were on the fence of being traded just 10 days ago, and the way that they've played recently, they clearly got Jed Hoyer into believing that they can compete, but don't want to actually dip much into the farm system and make any major moves today.
Do you think those players who a couple weeks ago were thought to be gone are glad they're staying in Chicago?
I would assume so, because Marcus Stroman had made it well aware before. He has pitched pretty terribly, actually, his last couple outings. I want to say he's given up 30 runs in his last 30 innings for an even ERA of 9, basically ever since they came back from the London trip. But he said beforehand he wanted to re-sign with the Cubs at the end of the season. Obviously, that doesn't stand in the same point as it did back then, but Cody Bellinger has revived his career with the Cubs, so I can imagine him wanting to stay put, and I can also think that the Cubs would want to re-sign him at the end of the year, and not trading a player, even though the idea of, we'll just trade him and then we'll sign him back in the offseason, that hardly ever works. You do give yourself a somewhat sizable advantage by keeping that player on your roster. So if you want to re-sign Bellinger, I think that was the right move to not trade him.
On the south side, the White Sox got rid of a slugger who reminded me of former Sox sluggers. Jake Burger gone.
That one was a little confusing to me. Jake Burger is young. Obviously, he had dealt with some injury history in the past, but he's come all the way back. He's been one of my favorite stories. Tore the same Achilles twice when he was down in the minors. He was a first-round draft pick. He's come up this year. He's hit 25 home runs, And he's got 5 more years of control left after this season. So it's not like it was a player that is a rental that they shipped to the Miami Marlins. So I don't know if it's his profile didn't fit. Obviously, he hits a lot of dingers, but he also hardly walks. He has a bottom 5 on base percentage in the American League, a top 6 strikeout percentage. So maybe he just didn't fit the profile that they were looking for. They did get a great prospect back in return. Honestly, weird enough, the guy's name, Jake Eater. So you traded a burger for an eater, but he was the top-ranked pitcher in the Miami Marlins farm system. I want to say Fangraphs had him listed as a top 55 prospect, so I think it might have just been too tempting for the White Sox to pass up getting, a great prospect for somebody that maybe they don't believe in long term.
When I was a kid, I liked the Orioles because of Jim Palmer, Brooks Robinson, and Boog Powell. I guess they made a bit of a splash. They picked up a very good pitcher from our friends in St. Louis.
Yeah, they picked up Jack Flaherty, a very good pitcher from St. Louis. They were actually rumored to be in, with about 10 minutes left in the trade deadline, there was reports that they or the Dodgers were going to trade for Dylan Cease, who is now staying put. Bob Nightingale reporting that the White Sox do plan on contending next year.
Oh, really?
Yep, and even though you've traded away 40% of your starting rotation and 4 parts out of your bullpen, apparently there's going to be a revamp next year and they'll try to compete. But yes, the Orioles, who lead the AL East, which maybe to the surprise of some people over the Tampa Bay Rays for how hot they started, get Jack Flaherty. Honestly, I don't think they had to give up a lot for him. So I think seeing the Cardinals struggle as a White Sox fan doesn't do anything for me, but I'm sure all of my Cubs fan brethren can at least, even if they don't make the playoffs by the end of the year, say this series against the Reds goes downhill, they can enjoy the fact that the Cardinals are wallowing near the bottom of the NL Central.
And then Verlander, who signed a 2-year, almost $90 million contract with the Mets. He has, $35 million vesting option for 2025. He's headed back to Houston.
Yeah, he's one of those guys, kind of like Max Scherzer, who just continues to defy age. Despite his age, throwing incredibly well this season. And if he was going to go to a team, why not go to the one that you've won a World Series with? And
was he part of the cheating season?
I think he was, but he was pitching, and they haven't been caught in terms of pitching cheating whatsoever. It was just the trash cans and the batting. So I guess you could say, he was a bystander to it because he definitely would have heard the trash banging in the dugout, but not an active participant in the cheating as far as anybody knows.
2 more things, real quick. I love the video that you did with Rachel regarding NFL umpire and referee signals. That was terrific.
I hope you learned something from that. Obviously, that was for you, mainly for the refresher, because I know you can get confused sometimes.
Well, I hope, is there some sort of competition for radio stations' social media videos?
I would imagine so. You mean just between the cluster? Because I know each station tries to put out some great content.
I mean, that was just great. And if you're a fan of Bret Gogoel and Rachel Woodall, and you know who they are, and you listen to the program, go to some of our social media platforms, whatever. I think it's on all of them, all 4 of them at this point. But look at that video because it was very, very well done. Both you and Rachel, you guys have natural chemistry.
Well, I mean, I was just standing there doing hand signs. It wasn't like there was any actual back and forth between us.
It's still a great refresher for NFL fans.
It is, and you can learn something. Maybe you didn't know the pass sign for yoga in football, or you didn't know the.
I don't know who to believe. That's the problem. You say one thing, she says another.
Well, if I may, I will say that Bret is my NFL intern, and I am the expert. So
his internship's been going on for a long time.
Have you secured your press credentials for Hallis Hall?
I have not. You keep saying that you're going to get me that.
Well, talk to the program director. I know that we have them, and you might as well use them.
Yes, we've had this conversation before.
Nobody else is going up there, so
I think it would be so fun.
Well, added practice has just started.
You would have to be careful. You can't cause it a disruption.
Well, I would like to go with Bret, I think, actually.
We don't have 2. We have 1.
Well, in all seriousness, though, it would be more fun to go with Bret.
I know it would be, but we don't
One
have
of us
2.
can just sit in the car, and we'll just alternate. Somebody goes, we'll just switch every hour.
They run you off up there.
Wait, what if we did the thing where, 2 people are in one coat?
Big trench coat.
Yeah.
It would be a fun little bit for you to go, bring your tape recorder, bring your cassette recorder, get some sound, and you would be WLS's NFL insider at Hallis Hall.
My cassette recorder? I thought you said I could only bring one person.
Okay. Well played. And finally, Bret Gogoel, Austin Gogoel, Bret Austin. How many days are you going to attend Lollapalooza this year?
None. I will be up at a different music festival up in Appleton, Wisconsin. Much more low-key, much more my speed.
Can you bring a lawn chair and sit down?
No, it's basically different, 80 different small bands playing at several bars in downtown Appleton. So plenty of seating to go around. I'll be sitting at a bar stool or at an outdoor patio.
I figured it involved beer of some sort.
Well, you know my MO by now, John. It's only been about 2 years.
Bret, thank you for the MLB trading deadline update. We appreciate it, sir. And I encourage everybody to go check out the video up at WLS AM 890 and check it out because it's very, very well done.
This is John Howell Essential Cuts on 890 WLS.
Jay O'Brien reports for ABC News. He's in D.C. and he's been watching the developing story of the House Oversight Committee. They held a very special closed-door hearing. Reminds me of the old Charlie Rich song, the country song. When we get behind closed doors, this is yesterday, and they listened to testimony, quite a while. Hunter Biden's former friend and former business partner, Devon Archer, was there. This is the House Oversight Committee. And according to lawmakers who were in the room, Archer told them that Hunter Biden would often put his father on the phone. But the Democrats think it was quite innocuous. It was just a pleasant talk about the weather, what have you.
They never discussed business. Joe Biden did not know what the business dealings that Hunter Biden was involved with, and he never did anything in connection to Hunter's business dealings.
Well, Republicans say it definitely shows that President Biden, lied when he said he never talked business with his son. I don't recall exactly when he said that, but apparently he did. All right, let's start there with Jay O'Brien, who's watched this thing yesterday, or at least after the committee hearing was over. He heard the lawmakers and the fallout that's been underway for the better part of 24 hours. Jay, thank you for your time, sir. In general, do we know the details of these calls?
Well, and that's the thing, is we don't know specifically firsthand what Devon Archer, not just about the calls, but what he even told lawmakers about those calls, because as you said, that testimony was behind closed doors. It was kind of in a deposition type setting, not the normal televised hearing that you're used to seeing on Capitol Hill. Not to say that Devon Archer won't testify in public at some point, but that wasn't what yesterday was. Now, the Republican-led committee wanted to hear from Archer because, as you said, they're looking for evidence that links Hunter Biden to his father's finances. You and I talked about this a little bit yesterday, but a word one of my colleagues used was jockeying, and it's a good description of the fact that lawmakers really jockeyed over how significant Devon Archer's testimony was, and it really came down to what side of the aisle you were on. Republicans came out from behind those closed doors yesterday and said Devon Archer blew the whistle, and they accused the president, based upon Archer's testimony, of lying. And then, of course, Democrats came out and said Archer didn't provide any evidence that linked Joe Biden to his son's business dealings. It really depended on who you heard from as they came out of that room. The person we have not heard yet is from Devon Archer, despite the fact that we heard a little bit from his lawyer, who just said we're aware that both sides are taking a victory lap on what he said.
Why did Comer and Jordan decide to keep this behind closed doors off TV?
It's a pretty common process, honestly, when it comes to congressional investigations. Oftentimes, you interview a witness behind closed doors, you gather their testimony, you fact-check their testimony because they can't lie to you, or at least it's illegal to lie to you, and then sometimes you call them before a larger proceeding. Also, timing is a factor in this, not to be the one that kind of pours cold water on it, but Congress is out in August. There are no members of Congress in that building except for the handful who decided to go to that testimony. So it's not to say that Devon Archer won't testify in front of the cameras in the House Oversight Committee room, but that's not what happened yesterday. So like I said, we're only getting the readout of what he said from the folks who were in that room, and the folks who were in that room, while also running this investigation, are professional politicians.
When did President Biden specifically say, I don't have any knowledge of any business with my son?
Oh, he said that repeatedly. That has been his line pretty consistently. And he's been asked also by reporters, as recently as, my recollection is correct, a few months ago was the last time he got that question, maybe even a few weeks ago. Did you have any knowledge of your son's business dealings? It was a yes or no question because it was a shouted question at an event, and his answer was no. And that's why Republicans say, by nature of the president being on those calls, if what Archer is saying is accurate and being accurately represented by the lawmakers who are in that room, by virtue of him being on those calls, that is being involved in his son's business dealings. And that's why you're seeing Republicans like Jim Comer, who's the Republican running this investigation, say that the president, quote unquote, lied. The other side of that, as we've been kind of saying, is Democrats say, okay, he was on the phone, but according to Dan Goldman, who was a Democrat in that room, Archer never testified that those calls were about business. He testified that those calls, according to Goldman, were about the weather, were about pleasantries. So what is a call about business and what isn't, and who's telling the truth, that is still very murky. But you can expect when Republicans come back to the Capitol in September, they're going to be talking about this a lot. They already are.
I heard Jim Jordan on, I think, Hannity, speaking about a dinner that Joe Biden attended with Hunter and some of his quote-unquote business associates. Was that part of the testimony?
That was part of the testimony specifically, and I think if I remember correctly, Jordan is referencing the dinner, or at least the time that Biden meets President Biden, rather, meets Devon Archer. So he meets in person with Devon Archer once, if I recall correctly, in the White House when he was vice president. But the Democratic reception to that is yes, but it was at a holiday party. And it was, Devon Archer's on the White House visitor log. This is the Hunter Biden business associate who's the subject of all this testimony. But he's on a holiday, or he's on the log during a holiday party. So there's a lot of tit for tat in all of this. And you don't know which end is up until there's a public report that the committee may or may not issue.
So the times that Biden supposedly lied when he said he never talked business with his son, that's the basis of what Kevin McCarthy is going to utilize for a possible impeachment inquiry?
Well, that's still up in the air as to what form that impeachment inquiry really takes. And McCarthy has been intentionally somewhat vague about that. Even when I and other reporters have asked him in the hallway, what are you talking about when you say impeachment inquiry? The line McCarthy always comes back to is inquiry, not impeachment. When he says impeachment inquiry, the emphasis is on the inquiry, not on the impeachment. He's saying that if the White House were to deny these congressional committees, like the one that just interviewed Devon Archer, the documents they want, the testimony they want, to talk to whoever they want, if McCarthy gets wind that the White House, as McCarthy would characterize it, is stonewalling the investigation, then he says that would necessitate an impeachment inquiry because it would give these lawmakers even more power than they have. What he's talking about in the congressional rules is still unclear. Congressional committees got power whether it's investigating an impeachment inquiry or not, but it's certainly something where McCarthy has brought up. But he's given himself an out by saying if they are cooperating, then we won't bring the impeachment inquiry. So he kind of appeases both the moderates in his party, some of whom have publicly said they would not support an impeachment inquiry because maybe they're in swing districts and things of that nature. But he also appeases the further right of his party that has a very, very strong desire to impeach the president.
Final question, and I'm drawing on, I hope, your knowledge of classic country music. Do you know if the estate of Charlie Rich receives any royalties for every time we say the phrase behind closed doors?
I don't. But if they do, then they are in luck, and they're going to keep being in luck because this investigation is not going to wrap up anytime soon.
Jay O'Brien, thank you for your time. ABC News in D.C., we appreciate it, sir.
You're listening to John Howell, Essential Cuts on 890 WLS.
Lollapalooza opens Thursday here, just south of the NBC Tower, Grand Park. And with new concerts and new opportunities, that's music to the ears of scammers, especially huge concerts like Lollapalooza and Springsteen. Let's start there with Steve Bernas, President and CEO of the Better Business Bureau of Chicago and Northern Illinois. We visit with him every couple weeks. Steve, with these blockbuster concerts in town this summer, how do we protect ourselves?
Well, good afternoon, John. Thanks for having me. The key is dealing with reputable organizations, dealing with a licensed ticket broker or the venue itself. We heard so many horror stories after Taylor Swift concert. 12 people got arrested at Soldiers Field directly, but that usually doesn't happen. when there's a shortage of tickets, and like it's happening now for Springsteen, of course, the tickets scammers are out there, and they will be out there, and they're getting more sophisticated, John. And what I mean by that, they're actually having additional people think that they bought tickets from this person and that it's a guarantee that you'll get it, because I got the tickets from them a few weeks ago, and it happens all the time. And as I mentioned before, my relative fell for this at the Taylor Swift and lost over $1,000 because she thought it was because somebody else called her and said, yeah, I got the tickets from this person, and she did great. So they're getting more elaborate. And again, consumers don't know what to look for. There's electronic tickets now, but the scammer says they have these tickets and they will mail it to you or email it to you. But first you got to pay them, John, and you got to Venmo me. And that's the tip off to the rip off is unconventional payment methods, because you can't get it back like you can on a credit card.
So if somebody's selling tickets to a concert and they're using a credit card, they're asking for a credit card, you would say that is by and large legitimate.
It's legitimate to a certain degree because they could want to steal your credit card, John, but at least you have protection. If you Venmo somebody or Cash App somebody the money willingly, even though it's a fraud, you don't have protection like a credit card. So, yes, the scammers are trying to get you off of credit cards, but also they want your credit card number, John. So you just got to deal with a licensed ticket broker or the venue itself, and that's the only safest thing. Buying on Craigslist or anywhere else, Facebook Marketplace, it's like going down a dark alley and buying from somebody in a car. You wouldn't do that in the real world. Why would you do it on the online world?
I used to buy tickets from scalpers outside the ballparks, but I don't think I ever got burned. But that was, many, many years ago, not nearly as sophisticated.
Not as sophisticated as they are now. And they actually tried it to Taylor Swift. They were out there trying to say, I'll email it to you right now. We need your Venmo account, or Venmo me the money. And then they actually walked away, and then they didn't have the tickets, and they got a fake email, which just looked like an electronic ticket, a copy of it. And that doesn't hold up. You don't know until you get there and put the ticket through, the electronic ticket, before you know. And that's the only way. You can't tell by looking at it anymore, John. It's so elaborate now.
One other fraud that you pointed out at bbb.org, which is a great website to visit regularly. People are there's this new media platform out there, Threads, obviously, and this is another opportunity for fraudsters to scam social media platforms. How does that work?
Well, we've seen it right away, John. As soon as Threads came up and running, 100 million people started using it, and the scammers were right there with it. They go where the traffic's at. They go where the people at. So it's a new platform. So they just try these new scams and old scams and with new twists, and they're taking people's money just like they were in any other platform. So I think consumers really need to, be careful, think before you give the money to somebody or fall for a scam. Do the research, John. I mean, my 36-year career at the BBB, my biggest frustration has been consumers who don't check first. They check after, and they realize they've been duped. Spend all the time you did beforehand, you wouldn't lose the money. And we need consumers to come to the Better Business Bureau Scam Tracker and let us know, even if you don't fall for it, let us know about these scams so we can do our weekly warnings like we do and prevent this from happening to your family member or friends.
How many days are you going to attend Lollapalooza this year?
I'm not going. Too old for that, John.
Oh, come on, Steve.
No, I'm not into concerts anymore like I used to. So I'd rather sit at home and listen to my own radio.
What was the best concert you ever attended that you can remember?
Bruce Springsteen was by far the best concert I've ever been to. It was great.
What venue?
Soldiers Field it was years ago.
Yeah.
Many years ago.
I think we talked about that concert in regards to a concert that was held there this past weekend. That Springsteen had just as many people. Soldier Field had texted out or something, put up on social media that we had the most people ever for a concert, which was quickly checked and double-checked. They said, no, Springsteen about 25 years ago had the biggest crowd there. I mean, for a concert.
Right.
Yep.
Right. That's what I heard as well.
All right, Steve, thank you very much. Steve Bernas, President and CEO of the BBB. Go to bbb.org. We'll talk to you in a couple weeks, sir.
Thank you so much, John.
Don't fall for anything.
This is John Howell, Essential Cuts on 890 WLS.
All right, while we wait for special counsel Jack Smith, when he hits the podium and stands behind the lectern, we'll bring it to you. Let's go through some of these numbers. Donald Trump is trouncing the rest of the GOP field combined, and then some. Two new polls. The first one, very fascinating, with a lot of crosstabs. You should check it out. New York Times Seneca College poll. Now look at this. In a new Gallup polling, Republicans hold a slight partisan edge over Democrats. 45% of those polled say they are Republican or lean Republican. Only 42% are Democrats or lean that way. So that you put that to the side, but it's important to build on. That's a slight gain for the GOP from 2022. So even as rancorous and as divided of a country that we are politically, the Republicans are gaining just a little bit. As far as the first poll, the New York Times poll, why this matters. The sum of all the polling shows Donald Trump is on track to run away with the GOP nomination. Nobody has a chance now, barring some sort of catastrophic, cathartic event, of taking him down. Barring a change that would make him drop out, he and President Biden could be in a dogfight in a general election. This New York Times Seneca poll shows Biden and Trump tied at 43% in a hypothetical rematch in 2024. The criminal indictments have not crippled Trump at all as far as his general election chances, and obviously not in the primary either. Times chief political analyst Nate Cohen wrote, "It does not seem to be a fluke because they did the same poll last fall, and that also showed a very close race in a possible presidential rematch." Nobody's that excited, Republicans or Democrats, to see this again. But both parties seem to be stuck with these guys. Cohen explained that on the GOP side, Trump looks tough to beat because of his hold on the MAGA base, the real Trumpians. That's just over a third of the party's electorate. 0%, not a single one of the 319 respondents in that MAGA category, this is from Mr. Cohen, say that Donald Trump has committed serious federal crimes. Not one person. Trump leads DeSantis by 37 points. 54 to 17. Next closest candidate at 3%. The rest don't even show. In the half century of modern presidential primaries, no candidate who has led his or her nearest rival by at least 20 points at this stage has ever lost a party nomination. That's from Cohen as well. Trump's lead over Ron DeSantis is nearly twice as large as the next closest historical example. Reality check, Trump's campaign is financially strained because of legal bills. He's collected north of $100 million, and there's a filing earlier this week, or maybe last, that $40 million plus have already been drained away for attorneys, legal fees, his legal defense funds. So that's their biggest problem. Not the fact the polling, forget about that. Nobody's catching him, at least not at this point, barring some sort of catastrophic event. And there's only two guys out there speaking any truth at all, truth to power, right? And one of them is Christie. I'm not going to take time to play Christie here, but I will play a little bit until Jack Smith comes to the podium. I will play, this happened in Iowa over the weekend at the Lincoln Day dinner. They had a lot of the candidates there, including DeSantis and Trump. And this guy, there's a lot to admire about, Will Hurd. He's a former CIA, not just an analyst, but an operative, and was a congressman. He's out of Congress now, but he took a sledgehammer to Trump at this event. And the crowd did not like it. First, he went over Trump's record, loser, loser, loser. And then he goes into the fact he lost because of...
And the reason Donald Trump lost the election in 2020 is he failed to grow the GOP brand in areas like women with a college degree in the suburbs, black and brown communities, and people under the age of 35. We need leaders who did like your Governor Reynolds, who went to places that people didn't expect, and that's how y'all turned red.
Okay, well, one more, and then we're going to go to Jack Smith. Anyway, went through a couple more comments about Donald Trump, that he's running just to stay out of jail. And then he said this, and then he dropped the mic and skedaddled.
Listen, I know the truth is hard. But if we elect Donald Trump, we are willingly giving Joe Biden 4 more years in the White House, and America can't handle that. God bless you, and God bless America.
He was so smart to put that at the end of the speech. That was the closer. That was the mic drop. And Jack Smith isn't quite at the podium, so I want to just go back and play a clip from before that. Again, this is Will Hurd, very attractive guy, very smart guy, CIA operative. He'd be the perfect candidate if it wasn't for the world we live in today. And he points out, and I concur, the only reason Trump is running is to keep those donations coming in and to keep himself out of jail.
One of the things we need in our elected leaders, for them to tell the truth, even if it's unpopular. Donald Trump is not running for president to make America great again. Donald Trump is not running for president to represent the people that voted for him in 2016 and 2020. Donald Trump is running to stay out of prison. And if we elect... I know.
That's an inconvenient truth, isn't it? Oh, you had to borrow a phrase from a book many years ago. Anyway, that's Will Hurd. He doesn't have a chance, obviously. Christie doesn't have a chance. There might be one or two that may have a chance if something happens to Donald Trump. But considering how the indictments are now adding up, and I'm not exactly sure how many counts there are at this point, lots and lots and lots. But his support doesn't waver, doesn't diminish. It goes up. So this is a big general question, and we put it up a couple hours ago, and a lot of you have responded. Text on our social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and now Threads. Why do Republicans still support Trump? More say they know he committed crimes, but they don't care. My thoughts on this always has been that he attacks, and he hates the same people who the Trumpians hate. He emboldens and validates their beliefs. He legitimizes their beliefs, whether they're right or wrong, and that's the key. And it's a business model, and it works. So he's going to play to the same crowd over and over and over and over, even with his abysmal record. And it is an abysmal record. We can go through that point by point if you want. You can yell at the radio all you want, but it's true. All right, so I don't understand it, but you can keep trying to explain it to me. I'll listen. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. So sit down, pound me out a response, and we'll get to some more before the end of the show. Now let's go to D.C. Special Counsel Jack Smith explaining the latest indictment against Donald J. Trump.
Good evening. Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and conspiring and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding. The indictment was issued by a grand jury of citizens here in the District of Columbia, and it sets forth the crimes charged in detail. I encourage everyone to read it in full. The attack on our nation's capital on January 6, 2021, was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy. As described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies. Lies by the defendant targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election. The men and women of law enforcement who defended the U.S. Capitol on January 6th are heroes. They are patriots, and they are the very best of us. They did not just defend a building or the people sheltering in it. They put their lives on the line to defend who we are as a country and as a people. They defended the very institutions and principles that define the United States. Since the attack on our Capitol, the Department of Justice has remained committed to ensuring accountability for those criminally responsible for what happened that day. This case is brought consistent with that commitment, and our investigation of other individuals continues. In this case, my office will seek a speedy trial so that our evidence can be tested in court and judged by a jury of citizens. In the meantime, I must emphasize that the indictment is only an allegation and that the defendant must be presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. I would like to thank the members of the Federal Bureau of Investigation who are working on this investigation with my office, as well as the many career prosecutors and law enforcement agents from around the country who have worked on previous January 6th investigations. These women and men are public servants of the very highest order, and it is a privilege to work alongside them. Thank you.
Why didn't you charge any of the other co-conspirators?
You already discussed the election. Are you planning to bring any other charges against more individuals?
Yeah, he's not going to take any questions. That's a special counsel, Jack Smith. What did you hear, Kim?
Well, one thing that I thought was interesting where he said the investigation of others continues. I wonder who the others are.
Well, there's 1,000 people thus far. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, this is going to be this, in my opinion, I talked to a number of legal experts. You've heard them on this program. This is going to be tough to stick the landing on this one because this isn't about what he did. And he did say, now let's peacefully protest. Let's walk down and peacefully protest. This is going to have to essentially prove his intent from the get-go. Now, it may involve testimony, as you mentioned, and he mentioned from others, and others have mentioned, Pence and Giuliani and others who were involved that day. But this involves also the fake elector slates from a number of states. Georgia's still to come on this. But this is going to be tough to stick the landing on this one. I think the Stormy Daniels thing is a stretch. I've said that. I think all of these, except for the document case, are very, very tough cases to get a conviction. And also, keep in mind, it only takes one on the jury. And also, keep in mind the timetable is such on all of these cases, practically all these cases, they will definitely impact the election and probably go beyond the election and then some.
Absolutely. It's all supposed to happen right when the spring, in the spring, when he's starting to, when that 2024 election is ramping up.
Well, we talked to an expert regarding the Florida case, the document case, and with the additional defendant now. This is Ellie Honig, who said in fact, if I get a chance, I'll play these comments. With the new defendant in that case, that pushes that timetable back quite possibly until after the election. So it's possible that the American people may be rendering a verdict on all of these cases before any of the juries do.
Yeah, and I'm wondering what this is going to do for Vice President Pence, because in the indictment, Trump apparently told Pence, you're too honest, when the VP objected to blocking the Biden win. But
again, that's it's just idle chatter, or is it a criminal intent? That's what the jury will have to decide. All right, so that's the update. 4 new counts, brand new indictment against Trump. You just heard from the special counsel Jack Smith here on WLS.
John Howell, Essential Cuts. Check back every weekday for another episode of John Howell, Essential Cuts on 890 WLS.